Okay, welcome. Hello, I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. Today, I'm super excited for several reasons. One, I get to introduce you to my friend, Brady Patterson. And Brady and I met through a group actually several years ago, but it's only been recently that we've gotten to know each other a bit better. And I'm such a super fan of Brady. You're going to see why in just a minute. He's got a lot going on and he's a very interesting person. And our topic is going to be super fun. So Brady hails from Canada. We were just joking that I'm kind of a wannabe Canadian. I get accused of it every once in a while, but I can almost throw a rock and hit Brady. He's north of me a little ways. Brady is also a multiple best-selling author, survival trainer, and international rodeo champion. He has worked with Fortune 500 companies like Shell, BP, Husky Oil, and Suncor. As a survival and leadership trainer, he has worked with Les Stroud of Discovery Channel's Survivor Men, the cast of the History Channel's Alone, and the Global Bushcraft Symposium, the largest conference in the industry. Brady helped grow the Entrepreneurs International Network from 10,000 members in 4 cities to over 150,000 members in 31 cities and 5 countries. Currently, he is the Director of Strategic Partnerships of the #1 joint venture network for coaches and consultants, where he teaches entrepreneurs how to build a solid referral network for their business, where to find those partners, and how to generate 6 and even 7 figures through cultivating authentic relationships at the JV Insider Circle. Like I said, Brady resides in Vancouver, Canada, with his amazing wife, Jamie, of 12 years, where he stays very active paddleboarding, running an ice bath club. Like, we just are going to have to ask more questions about that. And he also goes on wilderness survival expeditions. So Brady, welcome. Nobody else has an introduction like this, like ever. So I love your introduction, but I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm glad to be here, Heather. It's nice to spend more time with you as always.
I'm going to have a hard time limiting my questions. Like, part of me is like, do we talk about the rodeo stuff? I come from a long line of Western people in my family.
Ah,
And also totally enamored with all of your like adventure wilderness craziness. I just love that. And I know you recently did like a summit or something around that topic, right? Survival and
yeah.
wilderness.
Back in earlier this year, I did the first outdoor adventure summit.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like it went really well.
Yeah, I did amazing. It did far exceeded my expectations, and it opened a lot of. I've grown my business in the kind of marketing, coaching, consulting, author space, right? Like in expert space, and so my passion has always been the outdoors, growing up and traveling the rodeo circuit and doing all these things and having this survival training company. But that's always been more like the passion side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until this year that I really was like, okay, I'm going to explore this new area. And we're going to talk a bit about relationships and the currency that is involved with them today. But that really opened the window for me, or the door, I should say, to a whole new world. And so, it's super fun, super fun.
Where did your love of wilderness, where did that start? Your love of kind of this adventure, survival, wilderness stuff. Where did that begin?
I don't remember not ever having it. So for me, I think maybe it was growing up in a family that, I remember my dad, well, I don't remember. I've been told that when I was a young child, my dad would take me hiking, horseback riding, things like that when I was very, very little. And so that's always been there. I remember going on my first outdoor adventure, I guess, where I had a sheet of plastic, a sleeping bag, and a pot, and a bucket full of food, and spending a weekend camping in the woods. And that was my shelter. That was my, like, everything. And so it's always been, I was 10. There's been other times too, but it's just always been present in my life.
I love that. Well, it's funny because I remember back to a time in my life, probably around the same age, I would say 9 or 10, where I would have like vivid daydreams about like, if I was, lost in the woods or on my own, like, could I hack it? Could I survive? And I remember the same thing. Like, I used to prepare this little fanny pack, right? Back in the day of fanny packs. I think they're making a comeback.
I wear
Um,
one.
Awesome. I knew they were making a comeback. You just proved it. But I would fill mine with little survival tools. Like, I'd wrap little matches and saran wrap and put them inside these little plastic, like all the things. I was obsessed with it for a time. And unfortunately, my dad, usually when they did like adventurous outings, out of doors, he would just take the boys. So there were 6 of us in our family, right? And there were 2 boys and 4 girls. And I remember begging him, like, Dad, please, can I go? I wanted to go so badly on this one trip because it was the boys, my dad, and then a family of our cousins of all boys. And he let me go. So I got to traipse along, and we like hiked miles into the mountains, and we stayed in this little miner's cabin. And the funny thing is, it was full of mice, right? So we got to sleep with the mice, and like there were crazy noises. I mean, that's not really roughing it because we were inside of this little cabin, but the cabin was really rough. But one night my dad opened the door because there was all this crazy ruckus outside, and there was a big bear right outside the door, like with his hand up, trying to reach and pull down our food, whatever was stored up there, right? Anyways, but as a kid, totally enamored with the topic that you know a ton about and live and teach people now. So when did you transition to teaching that?
Oh. Well, I ran a business in the oil field for about 13 years. And for me, when you work in the oil patch in Northern Canada, you can really only operate for a very short window of time in the winter because it's a lot of muskeg. And if you're not familiar with the term muskeg is basically like swamp. And, you can park a bulldozer and come back the next year and it's, just the top of the roof is still visible, right? Because it's sunk in the summer. So you can't really travel. And so I ended up figuring out that I could I could run my business in a very short window of time, this 4-month basically window when everything's frozen solid. And that gave me 8 months to spend time with my wife, to travel, to explore other business opportunities. And a big part of it has always been like, I would go out and do these camping adventures and things like that. And it wasn't until I started getting more into this coaching space and working with people in marketing and things like that, I was doing some work and somebody said, well, you do this outdoor thing. Why don't we take some of my clients out and you teach them some survival stuff. And then maybe we'll do some things with them from a consulting perspective around their business strategy. And I was like, it was just like an overnight thing, just a one night. It's like we go out 2 days, one night. And that was the first foray into it, was somebody said, well, we'll figure this out. And at the time, earmuffs, Heather, I had no insurance. I had no, nothing for that. Right. I was like, I'm just going to do it. And it went so well that I was like, okay. And literally like right away, somebody else asked me again, will you come and let's do a 4-day event where you come, you teach, we spend half the day working on outdoor skills. We spend half the day working on their business. That way we can combine these things. And I got a little smarter by that point. But, it was like, that's really when I made the transition. And I realized as I was attending different things, I was going to take instructions from different teachers and realizing that like many times they're teaching me stuff that I already knew. But there was always room for improvement. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm like the world's greatest expert. I just knew that there was things that I could learn from everybody, regardless of certain areas. And so as I was learning, I was just realizing, hey, I know a lot of this stuff already. I'm already integrating it into the business. It just kind of makes sense. And then I just figured, well, if nobody else is going to it's an opportunity for me to play. And it's an offer. And if I'm being really, if I unpack it even further, there's also an opportunity to play and get paid to play, right? It's like for me going out into the woods, like I just got back from a 6-day horseback riding adventure with pack horses, and we did in the Northern Rockies in the Caribou Range. And I've never done that before, but I guided the trip. Like I led the trip. It was, it was like I've ridden horses before. I've never packed horses, but we learned how to do it, and we went up and down things that I didn't know that horses could go up and down. And but I've always had that kind of, I guess for me, no matter where I go, I've always had this kind of adventurous spirit. You know, I'm like, I want to go out and play and explore. You know, my wife used to laugh. She'd come home and I'd be like laying in the grass and my face is half sideways and I'm watching bugs, you know, just like if I have the opportunity to just like, if I have relaxed time, or if I need a 15-minute break from calls or something else, I'll be laying in the sun on my side, watching things move in the grass or looking up at the trees above me or something. It's just like, just in my blood.
No, I love that. Well, and I love the ability to connect those pieces of yourself, even in, whatever ways you can, to show up and serve people. It makes it, I think, so much richer an experience, probably for you and for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this concept of relational capital, right? You and I were talking before we went live, and I love, love, love this topic. And I know it's something that you have just literally lived for your entire business career, right? And you bring it to other people's businesses, both for those that you work with right now at the JVIC or the JV, Insider Circle, JVIC, and in serving other people, right? Teaching them how to do the same thing. So talk to us about how you got into that world. What was your foray into that?
Yeah, I think mine goes way back. I think growing up in the oil industry, we started off as farmers, but getting into the oil and gas sector when I was a kid, I got to see how valuable relationships were in business. In fact, I think that, I'm pretty certain that relationships trump almost everything else when it comes to business, because people buy from those they like, know and trust. I mean, that's an old adage, right? Axiom, but I really saw it in action, right? It was like, people could look in the oil and gas industry. They weren't hiring people necessarily because they could do the job better or faster. They were hiring the job because it was their brother, their cousin, their friend, their colleague. Like, they knew the person. They didn't care if it could be done better by somebody else. And that really kind of set the tone for me. And I remember over time, through the different businesses that I became part of or owned or ran to the ground in one case, but I mean, we've all crashed and burned something, is the relationship came before anything else. And as long as I focused on the relationship, everything else was fixable, right? So the business that didn't work out very well, even though that didn't work, because I had established and focused heavily on investing in the relationship itself, when it went sideways, when things didn't work, that person was willing to forgive me, or those people were willing to, to kind of let me recover and be able to make it up to them. And I think that's another part of it, is like, I always looked at relationships as something I can invest in rather than rely upon, right? So it's like, if I put something in, if I give people my attention, I give people my everything, I guess, in a way, right? I give them all my focus and care for a period of time. We start to get to know each other, and I pay attention to the details, and I find out what they're working on and what lights them up inside. Then when it comes time that it sounds kind of like mechanical in a way when I say it this way, and now that it's coming out of my mouth, I'm like, it sounds very mechanical, but it's not a mechanical process, because I do it because I genuinely care. Right? I genuinely want to know what's happening. How can I help? What can we do? And then when it comes time for me to ask for something, and sometimes I never do, but if it comes time for me to ask, then I don't feel uncomfortable asking. Right. I'm always one of those people who's like, there were many times I'm not a very pushy salesman. So for sales and stuff, I wasn't one of those guys that was like banging down the doors.
The shark. Yes.
Yeah. I was very much like very, very low key, and my energy around that is pretty low. I just want to be able to be like, here's the thing, let's do it. Right. And I know that doesn't always work. And so I learned that if I spent more time focusing on the relationship with the person, that I didn't have to ask hard. I didn't have to push. I could just be like, hey, here's the thing we're doing. Are you in or are you out? And they would say, yeah, that sounds good. Or no, that doesn't really work for me. Right. And I didn't take it personally. And over time, that became the foundation of everything else. And I started using the term, it's either relational currency or relational capital. Yeah. Right. That way, and I think relational capital is one of the undervalued assets in a business, right? One of the probably the most undervalued. That people, maybe you're looking at like items in the office, and you're looking at your, if you're looking at your inventory or things like that, and you value that really highly, or the cash in the bank or the cash flow, you're looking at all these different pieces. But if you forget about the relationships, it's all over. Like there's literally like that matters more than anything else. And the people that I think oftentimes don't think about their relationships are off, and this is not a slam against them. I think it's just like those people are selling like, you know, tiny little items. It's not about the relationship. It's just about the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a viable business model as well. It just happens to be that if something goes wrong with their supplier is probably not going to bend over backwards to help them. Right.
Yes.
Whereas if something goes wrong on my end, I'll have friends that'll go, oh, you know, we have a mutual friend who's called me at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night and said, hey, I need something went wrong and I need an email to go out tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Can you do that? And I was like, yeah. I mean, it involves me getting out of reading mode and out of bed, maybe in some cases. And in that case, and going and programming an email and spending 2 hours doing something I didn't really want to do. But at the same time, my friend asked for it. And because he took the time to build that relationship, I was willing to do it. Whereas like, you know, there's many times that won't exactly happen in other businesses.
No, that's right. Well, and I think that, you know, the point is really important because I do like, there's this interesting conversation that every once in a while I hear, and I think you and I kind of live in similar worlds where the groups of people that we work with and that we're surrounded by are very similar, right? And the folks that I serve, I call them information entrepreneurs. They're coaches, consultants, online experts and educators, speakers and authors. And while there are people definitely outside of those circles as well in my professional circles, that's the bulk of who I'm serving, who I'm communicating with, etc. But you do get people who like feel like networking or connecting is kind of the chore. Like they want to be doing the businessy things, right? And I hear that and I'm always like, wow, this is so interesting because like the business systems don't matter. Your intellectual property doesn't matter. Like none of that stuff matters. One, if you don't have clients or you don't have people collaborating with you to like either send you referrals or get you introduced or put onto somebody's stage or whatever, right? Like the rest of it just doesn't even matter.
Well, it's so true. So networking, relationship asset,
Yes.
supplier, right? Your vendors, relationship asset or relational capital, clients, relationship capital, joint venture partners or affiliates or referral partners, like through different
Brainstorm partners.
brainstorm
That's
partners,
right.
all relationship capital. Like literally nothing else works without it.
Yes.
So, and even for the people that are selling widgets, right? It's like if they don't have those pieces, if they don't have their relationships, the supplier doesn't get them their widgets, the bank doesn't take or screws up their payments, whatever, right? Like they still have to have some sort of relationship involved. And I think that it's just, it's so needed for more people to focus on the relationship first. And that will help avoid so many issues. I've seen it so many times, you know, it just boggles my mind that people spend, you know, and maybe it's because I'm definitely an extrovert and I love people and I'm not one of those people who needs to hide away from folks. And I know that some people just need more space away from others. I just don't.
Yeah.
Right. But I do have noticed that even with those people that are more introverted, that the depth of their relationships are often deeper. But again, if they run a business, they tend to neglect the business relationships and focus too much on the personal relationships when they could spend a little bit more time focusing in the business area so that they have all those things really that they've invested in that capital so that when things do go sideways, as they almost always do at some point in your business, that at least then you can react to them with a team.
That's right. Well, and how much more rewarding is it to show up in your business and in the work that you do and have those relationships there, right? To me, it like totally changes the game. And I think, you know, the point that you make about, especially like, you know, you held up a paperclip for people that are not watching, like people that are focused on selling a thing or a widget or whatever, you know, sales can be hard for some people. And yet, you know, it's my belief that if we really believe in what we're doing, like sales is service. And you're right. Like you get to know the person and you get to know their needs and whether or not this serves them. And it's like you have the open space for it to be a clear yes or clear no. And there's no problems. Right. And watching my sister, who's a really good, she's excellent at sales, and she lives in, she works for Siemens and lives in the women's healthcare space, right? But again, it's a lot of equipment and technology heavy stuff, and you're comparing to other things in the marketplace. And while she knows that stuff inside and out, her magic sauce is that she knows when somebody's wife is sick and they've got twins, and she's sending them a meal to their front porch, you know, or sending somebody a card because their husband is terminally, like, she's so on top of what's happening in all of her connections' lives that, like, she's blowing the top off as far as like making sales in an area that historically has been really, really challenging to make sales in. Women's health is like the lowest on the totem pole in that company. And so it's, you know, I want people to understand the importance of this point that you're making about, like, doesn't really matter what you're selling, even if it is a widget. Like, the power of personal relationships really can transform a business.
Yeah, absolutely. One more anecdote around that. It's been a couple years now, but a couple years ago, I had a friend who was going through a really rough time. Her partner passed away, and, you know, or was going through that, was in hospice care. And I just sent food, right? It didn't even occur to me that, and I've never made I don't know that I've ever actually made any direct money from this person. She sent some referrals my way, but I can't actually track if I haven't looked to see if this is actually the case, but I do know that made such a huge difference to her that it made her, now for a year and a bit, maybe even 2 years, kind of reclusive, and I didn't see or hear from her except for, hey, thanks for the food. But after that time came back, she was like, hey, you have to meet this person, this person, this person. Can I help you with this? Can I, like, let's do this, right? And I was like, that meant, and to me, in a way, I'd kind of forgotten about the whole food thing. At that point, when a couple years later, you're like, you don't really think about something you did 2 years before. All of a sudden it came back, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, absolutely. Please introduce me to these people, right? And I think that this is this comes back to, one of my friends said this once. They said, you know, we all know the axiom, it takes a village to raise a child, right? But it also takes a village to raise a business, right? You can't run it in isolation. And so I think that's really what the heart of that matter was for me.
No, I love it. So you're an expert at this. You bring it to the businesses that you serve. How do you teach it? How do you teach a concept like this, right? Because in my mind, like, I'm thinking, like, some people get this or they don't. Like, they're either the kind of person that would already know this or they're not, but maybe that's not the case. How do you open the doors for people that haven't looked at it quite like this?
Well, I think it depends on the industry they're into, because some people have this inherently involved. Like, if you go into there should be a clear delineation too, because, like, I work in the more affiliate joint venture space, right? Now, in digital marketing, that means something entirely different than it does in real estate, right? So, you know, you can have a joint venture partnership in real estate. That means it's like a legal business between the two of you. And you'd know the terminology better than I would as a lawyer. But so having those pieces in place is very important, and being able to separate those. From an affiliate perspective, this is a handshake deal. It's people, like, just agreeing to support each other.
Collaboration. Yes.
Collaboration. I'll promote you, you promote me, or we find some way, we can do some sort of dance to find out what does work, right? So we can't always support the people we want to support because maybe there's a scale issue, maybe there's a deliverability issue. There could be any number of things that aren't equitable for both parties, and it's a negotiation. But at the end of the day, when I start having these conversations, I still manage to usually find something, right? I look for something. Maybe it's, you know, not when I'm explaining a joint venture or an affiliate marketing partnership, to somebody, I'm just going, like, explaining to them the assets that, oftentimes I'm just explaining the assets that they have and how they can leverage it to make extra money from what they're already doing. And at the same time, leverage ours to support them, right? And it's just kind of connecting those dots. So every conversation is slightly different in that some people don't have an email list, but they have a big social media following, or some people have, you know, I'm going to date myself, a Rolodex. And
I love that you said that, because that's a term I literally use, like, every day when I connect. Like, put me in your Rolodex. Like, oops, you know how I know, but I love the word Rolodex. People know exactly what you're talking about.
I remember them. Used to have one. So it's having those things in mind is like, how do things connect? And it makes it just much more simple to do those kind of partnerships. And of course, it's easier in most cases because the vast majority of people I speak to already know what a joint venture or an affiliate relationship is. But there are occasions where I have to explain, well, it's, you promote me, I promote you, or I have you come speak on a summit, or have you speak on a podcast, or have you come speak on a stage, or participate in a giveaway, or some sort of promotional opportunity where you send out your lead magnet. Now, the ones that are like, what's a lead magnet?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Do you have an online business? Do you have any part of your business is online? Yeah, I have a Google ad. Okay, tell me about this. So those ones become, it's really hard for me to find the pieces there, but I can direct them to places.
Yeah.
Right? I can, and that oftentimes becomes the start of the relationship. It's not about, at that point, when somebody says something like that, it's not about, hey, can you promote me? My instant thought is, how do I help this person find
to the level,
your path where they can start having results, where they can start leveraging the online thing? Because there's literally nothing better right now. I mean, it's the most powerful way to reach people is getting online, and and building your email list. And I don't know what exact stat is right now. The last time I checked, for example, like having an email list, email still outperforms social media by like 43 times or something like that, right? It's very close. It's not a 43%. It's a 43x.
Right.
And, and I gave a good example of this. When I ran my Outdoor Adventure Summit, the majority of people, I had a split. So about a third of the people had solid email lists. And the rest of the people had substantial followings on like Instagram or Twitter, Facebook, whatever. They're social media influencers. And so I was like, okay, I wanted to test this, right? Even despite having a 1/3 and 2/3, having a 2/3 advantage and a significant amount of followers advantage, the emails put more than 3/4 of the people into the events. And the other ones were me, right? And they were my social media, my friends, my community. And then there was maybe 200 or 300 people that registered as a result of social media efforts, which is still nothing to shake your head at. I mean, it's still 200 or 300 people that came in. That was amazing. But I had more than 4,000 people register for the event, and only 200 or 300 came from social media. Every single other one came from emails. Right. So, because I built, and it comes back to that relationship thing. It's like, I reached out, I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And this is the interesting part. When I started that summit, I wasn't thinking about how I could make a few bucks. I wasn't thinking about how I'd survive. I'm fine. My business is primarily, what I do is primarily in good shape. In fact, we've grown in magnitudes since this whole, the world shift. And my whole thing was like, I know people that have businesses that they're more bricks and mortar style. They don't have online components. They're teaching survival skills, or they're teaching outdoor skills. And I was like, I want to help my friends that are going to be in trouble right now. How do I help my friends? And in the end, that's how that whole summit came together, was how do I help other people? And in the end, it was wildly successful. I was not expecting the sheer turnout that it created. And it spun off into, now it's going to become it's now a regular thing, right? So this is again, that comes back to the power of what happens when you start leveraging that relation, or putting the dollars into the relationship capital.
Yes. Well, first of all, congrats. I mean, congrats that was such an awesome success. And your point is well made about email still working when you use the tool the right way, right? You focus on the relationship building and the relationship first. So for people that, and I think, what I see is people staying too long in the path of oh, I got to build this myself, and I got to walk this road and figure it out myself. What is it that causes people to do that, right? All the hard work and the striving, because I think that across the board, people do too much of that versus looking for earlier opportunities for the collaboration, for the growth through fun, right? For me, that's how it feels.
Okay, this is a wild guess. I don't think nobody listening take this as the gospel truth. The whole thing with I feel is in the past, basically World War I and World War II broke a lot of people psychologically. And sorry for the downturn here, but it's relevant context. I think it broke people psychologically, and you had to, up until the Industrial Revolution and everything that came with it, you had to work hard to make a living. You had to do certain things. Yes. So there's thousands of years of history behind that. And then we got to the wars, where all of a sudden now it came back to it again, and it really enforced it. And when people came back from that war, or from each of these different wars that happened, and not just the world wars, but the other ones that came after, it got increasingly more difficult. And there's been a drive towards this kind of lone wolf mentality. And you see it lots in movies, and especially we're all fanatics around movies, or most people these days are big fans of entertainment. And as entertainment rose, one of the big things that really came out of it was this whole hero thing, right? Heroes do it by themselves. They struggle, they push, they do whatever, and then they get the big reward. So it sets this tone of like, I have to do that to get the big reward. But that's not the truth, right? But I think that's where it came. I think that's where I feel it came from, was like people thinking they're trying to emulate that. And I think because it was so predominant in especially the movie worlds, books, movies, things like that, any story, right?
Yeah.
That it didn't matter. It affected both men and women, because a lot of times, lots of the stories were about men, right? Yep. But it also affects women because they're reading those same stories, and they're like, okay, well, regardless of whether a man or woman, they have to do it themselves, right? But doing things on your own is hard. You look at like if we pull back and we're like, let's look at the explorers of the world. Most of them died young. Right? It was a hard life. If you visit even now, if you go up and you visit some of the indigenous population here in Canada, you visit some of the First Nations, some of those folks that are they're still off grid. They still live in very, what's the word I'm looking for? Primitive situations. They don't have power. They don't have running water. They live in tents. They're traveling. They're, whatever. Then that's not all of them, but there's definitely a group of them. And they don't live long lives typically. Yeah. Because it's very hard, unless they're in a good community. And again, it comes back to, it's that community that pulls things together and they share the load. But when you have to do it all by yourself, it's exhausting. I mean, it's like, it's like going to, if you're a fitness person and you get into like something like the CrossFit world or someplace like that, or individual sports, right? Fighting, things like that. Very few people that get into those individualized things have very long careers. It's the team people that have long careers.
I love that. Well, and your point about even in the process of collaboration, because let's be clear, there's ways that collaboration can go wrong, right?
Yes.
And what I find, I can share from my limited experience though, is when people are putting the deal first, the money first, like all these other things ahead of relationship. The phrase that I use when I'm coaching people, even on the front end, about business partnerships or joint ventures or any kind of collaboration, really is like, you have to prepare for the divorce, because it's coming in some way or another. It's coming. Like either the project is going to go well and it's going to wrap up, or it's going to lead to the next thing, or it's going to fall apart. And you need to know like how to handle it if things do fall apart, right? But people don't like to think about that. We don't like to go into a marriage or even a business collaboration thinking about how things might fall apart. So the emphasis on really putting the relationship first, how do you teach people that? Like, what do you say around so that people have their focus on the right place, rather than getting into a collaboration thinking like, oh, I'm going to make $1 million and this is going to be awesome?
That's an interesting question. I don't really teach people directly about that. And maybe that's something I can actually add to this. I think indirectly, I probably do, because I talk a lot. And the big story I tell people usually when it comes to this is like, the relationship matters first, because when something goes wrong, the only way to fix it is by having a good relationship in the first place. And that goes back to the very first webinar that I ever booked. And this is a story I tell to clients and stuff. The first time I ever booked a webinar, I cost my client roughly $100,000 up front, not including the back end sales, because I booked a webinar 2 hours earlier than it actually was. So and I wasn't running webinars. I wasn't doing sales like that for my clients at the time. And now I do that, right? I'll get on the webinars, I'll train. That's one of my, I eliminated that problem by when I work with the clients, I learn their system so that if I screw up or if I make a mistake, I can take over and do it in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I scheduled a webinar for, in the system for 11 a.m. But in my client's calendar, I put it at 1 p.m. And so at 11 a.m., 750 people got on a webinar and his conversions were very high and there was nobody there. 45 minutes later, we were able to get him on the webinar. Of course, by that point, we were down to about 20 people, right?
Ugh.
So it really, I describe it like, if it wasn't for the fact that the relationship mattered first, I would no longer have been with that client. Like he would have fired me, right? So it's like, we focused on that, and I never made that mistake again, right? I mean,
Right.
it allowed me, mistakes allow us to alter, adjust, and correct for future progression, right? And if we're not allowed to make mistakes ever, we're never going to make any progress, and the business is just going to be stale. And so that was my big thing. When I tell people, I tell them that story, and I'm like, you got to be willing to make mistakes, because mistakes are going to happen. So I do tell them that, but I don't teach them like little specific tactics, because I don't think there is a tactic on that one.
Yeah.
It's just like, the biggest thing is own your mistake, and do what you can to do everything you can in your power to fix it. If you can't fix it, make it up in some other fashion. Just do anything you can to do that. And that partner, the one I promoted, or the one that promoted us and put those 750 people on the webinar, it took another 1.5 years of me sucking up in a way, hanging out, having conversations, and focusing on that relationship to where they promoted us again. Right? And now they're one of our best partners, right? With the current business. And so it's like having a clear plan and knowing that, like, what was it? Somebody told me once, plan for the worst, expect the best. And that's just the philosophy I live by.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And whether you teach it or not, the fact that you say it, right, that the relationship does need to come first, I think I just can't emphasize that enough, because, like, from the perspective, people show up to my door all the time saying, I want a bulletproof contract. And I'll say, there is no such thing, right? Like, you're at the wrong place. There is no such thing. I mean, I can make a good contract and we will get you really protected, but end of the day, if it falls apart, it falls apart. And it really gets down to the people involved and whether or not you're prioritizing a client relationship, a business relationship, a relationship with your independent contractor or your employee or whatever, right? And the importance of that is that in business, we have so many opportunities for things to go wrong because there's so many moving parts, not because we're terrible people, right? Not because people are jerks, although some are. But that's usually not the reason things go wrong, right? Things go wrong just because business moves, and sometimes it moves quickly and things can fall apart. And so I just really love that really, end of the day, whatever the scenario is, if you're putting relationships first of all, you're way more likely to get through it with less bruises and bumps and scrapes for both parties, right? But to be able to turn it into something that actually continues to serve you both.
And I think it trickles into one other place, in that, like, I'm one of those, I might be contrarian to a lot of people. I don't believe in separating personal and business life, because I think that we have one life. I don't think that we have multiples. And so for me, this same attitude that I have towards investing in relationships, I also I put that into practice in my personal relationship, right? I've been married for coming up on 13 years now. And we've had to, we've had to face a lot of diversity. We lost a baby. Which destroy, like, what's our entire focus of our life. Our life was built around becoming parents. So, and in our experience, not only did we lose a baby and she almost died, so we packed everything, we moved to Mexico for a while, just like recharged. But then we found out we can't even have kids as a result of the medical procedure that was involved. And, like, so it was just like all these different things. And then, sometimes partners fall in and out of love in relationships, right? It's like, for a while, it's like, I'm so focused on the business, I'm not giving her enough attention, or and my wife's also a business owner. She's focused on her business, so she's not giving me attention. And we're like on these ups and downs, but we always come back to making sure we have a practice of investing in their relationship, even if it means that, even if it's not something we really want to do at that time. And as a result, we've made it through all those things, right? We made it through not being able to have kids, losing a baby, my wife entering early menopause, all kinds of things, like all these struggles that you wouldn't normally think about affecting business, but they do. Our personal lives affect business so heavily. When we're having a bad day, I had to call my client. It was not that long ago, like 3 months ago, I had to call a client and tell them, I'm sorry, I have not been performing well. I have not been performing well, and here's why. And I told them what was going on with my wife and her entering early menopause and the struggles that we're facing, the hormonal swings and the yada yada, all the stuff, right? And it's all legit. The thing about this is, I don't want people to look at these as excuses, right? They're not excuses for why I didn't do the things there, but they are the reason behind what happened. And that, I think, is being honest about what's going on is more important than anything else. That makes such a difference, because if I'm honest about it, then I don't have to think about, what did I tell them? Did this happen? Did that happen? And it's like, there's no story to put together. It's like, here's what happened, and it's transparent. And here's how and the end part of that is, here's what happened. Here's how I'll fix it, right? Here's the plan I have to move forward. And I think that oftentimes it's just like there's a loop that doesn't get completed there, where people are like, they have this problem, they're scared to tell somebody something's wrong. Then they get around to telling them something's wrong. Both parties are upset, and then it just loops again. And it doesn't finish the loop, which is the finishing of the loop is, here's how I can fix it, right? Yeah. Or asking the question, how can I fix it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing I think that's really important about that story, and first of all, I'm sorry to hear about losing a baby, and like, that's some of the toughest stuff that people have to face together. I mean, that's really, really hard. But the point that you make, I think, is really, really important, that if we're not our full selves and really honest, and I've never been apologetic about like the fact that I'm a mom, and I'm a mom first in my work. And if it bothers you, you're probably not the client for me, right? Especially when family stuff ends up getting in the way. And I'm really forthcoming about that. And I know what you're saying about it's not an excuse, but in showing them that side of your real human life, like, you give them a chance to meet you, like, in your humanity, not in this persona of like this perfect, person that shows up perfectly always in business, because it's just not realistic. And I think we just get so much more out of ourselves, out of other people, and we get to show up more fully when we can do that, even though it sometimes feels a little bit like we're selling ourselves short, like, oh, well, this is the reason why I can't be. And it's actually, I think it's the flip side. You are being a more well-rounded and a fuller person, a fuller version of yourself, when you can do that and give people the opportunity to meet you there. I think that's a really beautiful example. Well, before we go, talk to me. I'd love to know, first of all, where you like to connect with folks. For people who are listening and are like, I want to know more about Brady. I want to find out about his survival skills or whatever. I want to learn more about how to create powerful collaborations in my business. Where do you like to connect?
Well, probably for me, easiest way is social media. If you like, if the adventure, I kind of intermingle everything, right? I don't have separations. So for me, Instagram is kind of my favorite channel. So at Brady Patterson, it's just all one word. It shows that I've been on the platform a little while. I have my actual name. But that's probably the number one place to find me. It's where I engage the most with my own community. Fun. When it comes to clients and things like that, we run these events that I think are absolutely fantastic. Every 2 months, we run an event called Collaborate. And for me, if you're in business and you have an expert-based business, the Collaborate event is just dynamite. It's like, with networking, it's hit or miss for a lot of people. And the reason it's hit or miss is because most people don't have a framework for it to actually communicate, right? How to get into a meeting. And, I used to have this strategy where I would walk into a meeting, somebody taught me, I would walk into a networking meeting and I would make a circle and I would make sure I talked to one person before I got around the whole room. And then I would reverse my direction and do that. And I would stand in the middle of the room at the end. And after somebody come and talk to me and I had talked to 3 people, I would leave. I'm not a natural networker. And then, this is a totally different ballgame, because here we're breaking people out into specific opportunities where they're able to talk to people about what they're doing with their business and how they can leverage partnerships online. So we're actually plugging all this together and saying, like, look, if you want to invest in relationships and build affiliate partnerships, joint ventures, get in the same space of people that want to do that.
Right.
And so we run these events every other month. I think you can I can give you the link and it can go in the show notes.
Yep. I love that.
That's probably going to be the best thing to send people to. And it'll give you a flavor of that world and why it's important and how your audience can leverage partnerships better than doing it on their own.
Yeah. Well, and I think for people who haven't ventured into this world yet, like the idea of having a framework and having some support in exploring the process is really key so that they don't feel like they're just, wandering around, making a big circle around the room. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it gives people a lot of comfort to like plug into a system that's tried and true. And so if you're listening, make sure that you check out that link for the upcoming event. Collaborate. I'll share it on my show notes along with anything else that Brady you want to share there, including your social media handles. Go to the show notes at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. So Brady, what do you want to leave us with today? What final thoughts or ideas or action do you want to leave people with today?
It's said a lot, but do something uncomfortable for yourself regularly, right?
Like an ice bath.
This is what I'm thinking. Right? Yeah.
I'm like, no, anything but an ice bath.
Yeah, but it's because it's not about the activity that you're actually doing. It's about the result that you create as you're going through the process and the discipline that it takes to do it. Most of us today are pretty undisciplined in a lot of ways. That's not everybody, obviously, but there's a lot of folks out there who are very undisciplined and they're like at the whim of their life and it just kind of happens to them rather than it being at effect. And so like I started my swim club because I had a phobia of cold water. I was literally scared of cold water. And so that became the foundation of like, I'm going to go do this once a week and I want to hang out with cool people. And it became like an entrepreneur's hangout every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. We're jumping to this ice cold river. Sometimes we're breaking the ice off the water. Like it's been a lot of fun and it's evolved in the past 3 years. It's gone up and down. It's been men, women, but entrepreneurs, employees, like the whole gamut of folks. But the common thread amongst that has been like the consistency of just doing something that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, having a joint venture conversation, the first time it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Having a partnership conversation or having any new hire, any new thing, any novel task is going to cause you a bit of uncomfortableness. And I think it's one of the most effective ways you can grow your business. So I'd highly recommend that. That would be if I ended with anything, be like, just get uncomfortable.
No, I love that. It's a really powerful point that you make. I mean, it's so interesting. The human experience is that we absolutely need things like what you just described for us to actually live our purpose and become the best version of ourselves and all the things. All the good stuff is on the other side of discomfort. But we naturally crave homeostasis, right? What we want is to be comfortable. So I think it's really important to pay attention to that and to shift it anytime we get the chance. Brady, I'm such a fan. Thank you for coming on today and sharing all of the wonderful parts of yourself and your history. I'm so excited for people to get to connect with you. I hope I get to have you back.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. We barely unpacked some of the stuff you started at the beginning. We got open loops to close next time.
Totally. Tip of the iceberg. Thank you, Brady.